Call the meeting to order. Opening prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Bless us as we gather today for this meeting. Guide our minds and hearts. Just to be generous in our decisions. Father, we praise you forever. Acknowledgement. Would like to acknowledge that we are on sacred Indigenous territory and thank the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation for being the stewards of this land. Approval of the agenda by Thomas. Any questions? Carried. Declaration of interest for 5 items before us.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, it is a requirement of audit committee members to sign a letter of declaration of interest at the start of each fiscal year. And as listed, the 5 members of the committee have submitted signed declarations of interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. The approval of the committee minutes. Moved by Laura. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Julie, first order of business, please.
Yes, we are at item B, which is awards and presentations. At this time, we don't have a presentation, but I would just like to state, as our external member Rory Keelty is arriving, that this is actually Rory's last meeting in attendance. Rory has finished his 2nd term as an external member with our audit committee, and we're very thankful for his dedication and contributions to the committee. We would like to take a moment here at this meeting, but also formally at one of our future board meetings to recognize Rory for his contributions to the committee. Sorry for you just arriving, Rory, but just wanted to acknowledge this as your last meeting in person with us. Thank you.
Rory, on behalf of my colleagues, we'd each like to thank you for your dedicated service to the audit committee. But because you were late, you get to sing the first song.
Just reflecting in the last few days and on the way up here, construction everywhere. My apologies for being late. The last 6 years and how quickly it's gone by. Caliber of the people I had the honor to work with. Some of the very difficult events that have happened for the world and for our country in the last 2 or 3 years. And I truly look forward to the day when I went through the Catholic system myself, so too my children. Truly look forward to the day when we flourish, never before. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rory. Julie?
Yes, through the agenda, we have no delegations. We move to item D, which is reports from committee administration for receipt. D1 is the school board compliance report. Superintendent Brian Hester will present.
Brian, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and through your chair. Before you on page 7 is an annual letter required by the Audit Committee Regulation 36110. The requirement is for the director to provide confirmation that all statutory requirements have been met. As noted in the letter, positive confirmation is being provided that there are no known compliance issues with related acts, regulations, or statutes. At that point, Mr. Chair, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Questions? Seeing none.
Thank you. We move on to item E, which is reports from committee administration requiring action. E1 is the audit service plan for the year ended August 31st, 2023. We have reached August 31st, 2023, and we've entered into the time we're preparing our year-end financial statements. And this evening, we have our external auditors, BDO, to present the audit plan for year-end, and I'll have Superintendent Brian Hester do introductions and introduce the report.
Thanks, Julie. Again, through the chair, I'm pleased to share report E1 on page 9. This is the presentation of our annual audit planning report for the year ended August 31st, 2023. This afternoon, we're pleased to introduce to you Mohammed Solman from BDO Canada, who are our external auditors. BDO has already completed the March 31st provincial consolidation audit requirements with us. And I've also recently completed some interim audit requirements through the summertime related to our year-end processes. Similar to prior years, BDO will highlight the processes to be completed as part of our year-end, and that will include areas of focus as part of the audit requirements for their purposes. So at this point, I'll pass the presentation over to Mohammed to walk you through their audit plan.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone else. Nice to be here and nice to meet all of you. So starting off with page 12 or 13 of the report, it outlines the table of content and your dedicated BDO audit team with Marcus and myself. And then moving on to the page 14, the audit timeline, I'll just briefly go over the entire letter. Our interim field work was completed in the final week of June, and we're presenting our audit report today. Our planning report, we're expected to complete the year-end field work on the last 2 weeks of October, with the expectation that we'll present the final report to the committee on or before November 15, 2023, with the release of the audit report on November 28, 2023. Our responsibilities related to the financial statements on the next page, page 15, briefly going over our year-end audit work and year-end round work, which involves interim timely reviews. So we work with management towards the timely issuance of the financial statements and completion of our interim reviews, provide timely and constructive management letters, including any deficiencies that we come across, as well as present our significant findings to the committee, including key audit and accounting issues if we come across any. So we consult with our management team throughout the year if there are any accounting issues or matters that come up, and discuss them appropriately in advance. The next few slides talk about our responsibilities related to fraud. We are responsible for planning and performing the audit to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from a material misstatement, whether caused by fraud or error. So this involves us identifying risks of material misstatements, obtaining sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, and responding appropriately to fraud or suspected fraud identified during the year. The likelihood of not detecting a material misstatement resulting from fraud is higher than the likelihood of not detecting a material misstatement resulting from error, because fraud may involve collusion as well as sophisticated and carefully organized schemes designed to conceal it. So moving on the next slide, throughout our planning process, we perform risk assessment procedures and related activities to obtain understanding of the entity and its environment, including board's internal controls. And throughout our risk assessment process and our communication, we have not come across any instances of alleged, suspected, or actual fraud for the year. Consistent with prior years, management will facilitate our contact with the committee members, and will confirm our discussion on fraud with a sample of committee members directly through email. That will be after our meeting. We'll reach out to management, and management will coordinate our contact with the committee members. The next few slides talk about our significant risks and planned responses. The first 3 significant risks on this page are consistent with last year. The first one being complex information technology environment, which due to the complexity of the information systems, IREN and K212, as well as the prevalence of automated processes and controls, some of which we rely upon during our audit. So our audit process includes in-depth documentation and processes on controls related to each cycle. We work with our certified information system specialists who work with the audit team to ensure we incorporate the testing of computer dependent. Our IS approach will include an overall assessment of the general IT environment, which also includes reviewing application control, system security controls, access control, and change control. Grant revenue and grant receivable, just an inherent risk that the revenue may be incorrectly deferred into future periods. Our approach will involve obtaining ministry confirmations, ensuring the amounts reported exist and are complete, as well as tracking the grant revenue over the grant continuity schedule. The final control or risk on this page is management override of controls. Just due to management's authority, they can override controls, leading to potentially misleading information. Our audit procedures will involve obtaining sufficient evidence over the journal entries recorded, as well as understanding the business rationale for significant transactions that we become aware of. On to the next page are two new significant risks that were identified. The first one being Bill 124. As you're aware, Bill 124 was a piece of 2019 provincial legislation that limited compensation increases to 1% per year for 3-year moderation period for both unionized and non-unionized employees. On November 2022, the Superior Court of Justice struck down Bill 124 as being unconstitutional, deemed it void of no effect, and an appeal was filed on December 29, 2022. When Bill 124 was struck, it presented the potential for a related contingent liability for public sector organizations, including school board. At this point, we're unclear on what the related accrual will be, but as the situation evolves, we'll work with management to ensure the appropriate accruals related to this, if identified, are recorded. The next one is a new standard which came into effect for all year ends on or after March 31st, 2023. It's the adoption of PS 3280 asset retirement obligation. Previously, the handbook did not include specific guidance on accounting for asset retirement obligations. In applying this standard in practice, it is very important for the entity to take its time to perform a thorough analysis when deciding which asset retirement costs are in the scope of this standard. Once the scoping has been completed, the entity must determine the estimated costs related to the retirement of the assets. To ensure proper scoping, it's imperative the employees with the appropriate knowledge are involved to ensure all potential asset retirement obligations are identified. Once the obligations are identified, they must be recognized and measured in accordance with the new standard, which requires the increase in the carrying value of the related tangible capital assets or component, and then expensing the amount in a rational and systematic. The risk related to this is the initial identification and measurement of the board's AROs as required by the standard, which is effective for this fiscal year. In its assessment, management has identified several assets related to the removal of asbestos and other related materials in other buildings. Our response to this risk will be going over management's completed ARO measurement estimates, which will include assess from both a completeness and a measurement perspective, and then we'll review the underlying assumptions to ensure the appropriate discount, inflation rates, and the projected time are used. Management has prepared an initial ARO estimates for the purpose of the 7-month reporting, which we audited as well back in May for the March 31st 7-month period. The next few risks on the next page, or page 20, are just other areas of audit risk just because of the nature of them. The first two, payroll and capital asset acquisitions, just based on the magnitude of both of these balances, there are significant risks or risk areas for us. And BDO will use a combination of tested controls as well as analytical procedures for these. The final one is a new risk this year. It's been something that's been discussed previously last year. It's long-term disability benefits plan for employees. The board self-funds its LTD benefit plan for employees. And as a result of COVID-19, the number of LTD claims significantly increased in recent years, resulted in a deficit in the LTD plan. The plan is paid out annually by the board, and there's a risk of depletion of cash reserve to cover this deficit. We will work with management to obtain their management's future assessment of the LTD benefit plan and review the appropriate note disclosures related to the plan, as well as future budgets and assessments to ensure there's not a going concern. Our materiality on page 21 has been determined on a 2% of prior year's expenses to be 20.8 million. Misstatements considered to be material are if they could reasonably be expected to influence the decision of users. So at this time, we determined 20.8 million or 2% of prior expenditures to be a reasonable materiality. The next two slides talk about our updated audit process. We previously mentioned that there's a new standard coming into effect, which is the CAS 315. It's a new auditing standard. or revision to the previous standard. And this involves us to identify and assess risks on financial statement areas that contain potential material misstatements, obtain the audit evidence, scope them, design audit processes, and report to management. And we also rely on IT as well as review management's or the board's IT systems and the implications of the usage of IT and automated processes on the audited financial statements. So if there's any significant deficiencies that we come across or any deficiencies, we'll note that on the final meeting to the board. The next few slides from 24 till 28 represent just some slight readings or spotlights on sustainabilities and how we complete our audit. They're just for your reading when you have some time. And then the final two are just spotlights on the public sector for any new changes in standards or updates that are coming through. The first one talks about the 4-step approach to AROs as discussed earlier. And then the spotlight discusses key identification considerations related to AROs. Our appendices include our engagement letter draft for this upcoming audit, and then the update to the accounting standards impacting the board for the next fiscal year. Within the PSAS update slide or page 37, it talks about the standards effective April 1st, 2022, which involved asset retirement obligations. But if you keep going on page 39, it also talks about standards coming into effect on April 1, 2023, which will be impacting the board next year. This involves standards changes related to revenue, as well as P3 contracts that may come into effect. This is for your purposes and for your reading. If you have any questions, you can feel free, and management can feel free to reach out to us, and we can expand on any areas of the report that would be required.
So at this point, we'd be happy to take any questions of the audit committee.
Any questions?
Just to make sure, I think I know the answer. Just to make sure, on page 19, we're talking about the deferral of Bill 120. The audit approach commentary references the fact that for purposes of the March 31st, we have to. Concern I would have is a reader could say, are those procedures not yet make any reference?
So through the chair, I can start. So for March would have been the provincial audit. So that would have been the whole, all consolidated up for Ministry of Education, all school boards and whatnot provincially. We haven't yet received our guidance specifically to what education's impact would be. It's important for the ministry when we get our year-end grant package and our year-end instructions that we're consistent across all 72 boards in the approach and how this is applied. So we'll be waiting and watching closely to see what the Ministry of Education specific lens is on this and the impact to us, if any. And that's when we'll determine if there is an accrual that we would have to then respond to and embed in our financial statements for August 31st, which is a different time period than the provincial consolidation back in March.
With you, but do we need to reference the fact that March is past waived until August? We have to look back to March and make any comment.
So through the chair, I think when we get that direction, that's what we then take into our financial statements. The ministry again helps all school boards to be consistent for readers. So they have a similar financial statement package across all boards. So they would give us some of that language or guidance to say, here's possibly a sample note that we would include in our financial statements that you'd expect to see across 72 boards. But I'm not sure it would be specifically tied to a March timeframe because we have to report for our purposes up to August. So we'd have to be current and up to date with an August amount for an impact that we would book on our financial statements. So I would expect it to be much more current than any March information.
The other thing I had was.
Sorry, do you mind if I interrupt for 1 second? Can I just remind all members that you have to speak really closely to the microphone, or those individuals who are attending virtually are not able to hear you. So that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
It only took me 6 years to get that straight.
And And we're still working on it ourselves. Thanks.
No, it's my, the last thing is on the slide, BDO's digital audit suite. For a humble tax guy over the years, translates the electronic to me. Are you comfortable at this point, or do you have any reason to be uncomfortable that your electronic approach is in sync with the systems you're going to be auditing here?
So the BDO audit suite represents the systems we use to obtain our assurance. So this involves working with management to use our global portal where they can upload the materials, as well as our APT Next Gen where we complete our audit procedures. In terms of the softwares that management uses, our IT or information specialists go in there, and we haven't had any significant deficiencies in prior years audit that we are concerned about. So as of right now, we're pretty comfortable with the softwares being used by management.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Go ahead, Mark.
Chair, with regards to materiality, you note that it's based on 2% of the prior year's expenses. Does that mean August 31st, 2023 or 2022?
That would be 2022, as we don't have the balances yet for 2023.
So then you update it once the numbers are finalized.
Yeah, we expect it to be around the same. So if there is any significant deviation from the balances, we'll note that in our final report to the committee.
I just wanted to make sure something's changed since I did audits.
No worries.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Laura. Any other questions? Seeing none, motion that the audit committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that the audit service plan for the year ended August 31st, 2023 be approved. Moved by Anisha. Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Lee.
Thank you. There's no additional business, so we move to questions asked by committee members.
Questions?
Question on, in your engagement letter. Summary, the October 22nd, 2022 summary for public sector accounting, the impacts thereon. The standards seem to be coming in gradually, different effective dates and sort of in a series of impact. What is the impact in the context of major projects or staff increases to accommodate different kinds of reporting requirements and trying to schedule the timing of those changes that have to happen internally, the expected impact of what was now phase 3 or phase 4 of these new standards coming in? Is there any thinking that has to go on about how we're going to manage this when it comes in 6 months from now, and that one comes in a year from now? So how are we going to manage that kind of thing?
So through the chair, we do take them in chunks as they come. So specifically to your question, the asset return obligation has been the most significant one we've seen in quite some time, probably since tangible capital assets was rolled out. So, we have to understand it ourselves, work with our auditors, work with the provincial team to make sure we're applying them consistently and under the direction of the ministry, because it has to be in effect into their system of software. So it's all applied again consistently across all school boards. That includes our staff, making sure we're aware of what the standards are and what the impact is to us, and to work with our, in this case, for example, our facilities team to go and assess our buildings and try and get an understanding of specifically, what could be in our facilities that may have to be quantified, and ensure that we actually have a basis for that quantification, and then see if we're in line with some of the ministry's estimates from other information they've gathered. So it's a lot of internal analysis, ensuring that we have our own plan and making sure it's in line with the auditor expectations, and that the amounts are booked in line with our financial statement requirements and submitted to the ministry with proper supporting documentation.
And so through that process, you're always assessing your capabilities to deal with the next implementation item.
Yes, and so, yeah, to your point through the chair, that's part of it. This was a big one to even gain understanding, because as they come along with this, we have to build our own knowledge, attend training sessions to understand what the impact could be, to make sure we're assessing what our fair liability of these amounts could be. So we're stating that appropriately. And then the other ones as they come along, the ministry or sometimes different presentations we attend, we'll speak to these so we can absorb that information and then take it back and internally with our teams say, do we know how we're going to approach this standard? Is there an impact going to come on our financial statements? And then we usually see the direction, usually after the fact from the ministry, come along and say, here's what our expectation of boards are to ensure it's applied consistently.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Motion to move in the camera, moved by Thomas. Any opposed? Carried.
At this time, will be moved into the in-camera, so the public session will be held until we return to public session. And then everyone here in the room will be moved to the in-camera portion.
Thank you. In our in-camera meeting, we received 6 audit reports. Audit finding for 2022, 2023, 2022, 2023 legal risk report, a detailed annual report, summarized annual report, and proposed internal audit plan for September 2022 to August 2024.
I think through, you have to get a movement for that. an
Moved
approval.
by trustee Thomas. Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Adjournment. Moved by Anisha, trustee Thomas. Any opposed? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much. And again, Rory, thank you for your continued service with Dufferin Peel. It's most graciously appreciated by not only the audit committee, but the board as a whole. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you all.